Topic number 3. So, Horizon Zero Dawn was just released this week. I had the chance to pick it up on Friday actually, and binge play it. That's how impressed I was. Started at, I want to say, about 5 in the afternoon. Went actually into 3 in the morning. So probably more a little longer than just like a standard 8-hour daily grind. But what I wanted to do was, since like I said, I'm around 10 hours into the game, so I've seen enough of it to kind of get a feel for all of the elements into it, or all of the elements of it, and I wanted to kind of get your perspective, Matt. If I were to kind of segment these pieces out and present them to you almost as a pitch, would you think, are these kind of things that you'd want to see in a game, or you're kind of like, well, maybe, might want to try something else, or, like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. So I know that, first off, Horizon Zero Dawn is an open world game. It resembles pretty closely things like The Witcher, some Final Fantasy 15, as far as, very epic and moderate to epic in scale. Immersive storylines, side quests, a couple of different transportation modes, some kinds of weapon customizations and skill trees, things like that. So Matt, kind of what I narrowed these things down to is that, first off, is that the story itself. So what we know so far, or what we've seen from the advertising, is that you have almost kind of like a primitive, prehistoric human tribe, and they are hunting what appear to be mechanized dinosaurs and mechanized beasts. Now, the story from what I've seen so far is that, that kind of holds pretty true. You're living in this is Earth that we're talking about. This isn't some other kind of far off world.
Okay.
That there was something that happened way back when, where technology essentially got out of control, and this is what they're living in now, is this world of the mentality of the people. It's kind of it's reverted down to a tribal level and a tribal understanding, where you have like the natural world that that they live in, the greenery, the beasts, everything is kind of referred to as the All Mother. And way back when, there were these people that essentially they started shunning the All Mother in favor of technology, because technology promised all these great things as far as ease of life, and it can do all this stuff for you. And eventually, there appeared essentially the machine devil, and then the All Mother and the machine devil kind of went head to head, and the All Mother won. And so now what this story is kind of being based around, it's a mentality of trying to understand kind of the fall of civilization through these almost simplistic eyes. Now, I wanted to poke your mind, or pick your brain about, is that you're living as an outcast. You're starting off in this little enclave. It's a matriarchal society, and people kind of have painted faces, and they're doing hunter gathering, that kind of thing. And there are about, it looks like, 2 or 3 other major kind of kingdom areas of escalating I'll say technological focus, but it's still very, very minimal. Now, the big crux in this game, and I am getting to this, I'm just trying to frame this thing, before I start jumping into, is that the main character that you deal with, a lot of what revolves around her is that she falls into this ruin, which is essentially like an old lab. She comes across this little triangular device that she just kind of puts on, and all of a sudden you kind of see this lit up spherical grid around her, and that's kind of how you play the game. Is you're able to interact. It can do scanning. It can track movement of different beings. But does this concept seem like it would kind of work for you if I wanted to come to you with an idea for a game where it's like, all right, I want to tell a story of a woman in almost like a prehistoric mindset that really doesn't fully understand technology, and this is kind of how I want to do it. First off, um, does that kind of story interest you, or are there some elements of that which are kind of like, well, maybe that's a little off, or like this is really what I find interesting?
I guess I checked IGN.
Mm-hmm.
IGN review was like a 6 minute review, and I've obviously seen the trailers and stuff. Um, I'm still kind of on the fence about it. I mean, it obviously looks fantastic. From what I understand, the gameplay is great. Uh, I'm in that console war mindset right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think this is a very good topic to have because I almost bought a Xbox this week on eBay because they were $200.
Oh.
So it was an Xbox S or an Xbox One S or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think this is a PS4 exclusive, right?
I believe so. Check.
Just PS4 and maybe PC.
Sounds right.
So I mean, this is kind of one of those quandaries.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the Titanfall versus Horizon Zero Dawn. The concept kind of seems all over the place a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of having seen some of the gameplay, it does look great. Now, I can tell you, typically it's not my type of game. The open world concept is a little overwhelming for me because of the limited time that I have for video games.
Mm-hmm.
For something like that to really work for me, the gameplay would have to be solid. The story would have to be pretty solid. I don't know. There's no online element to this, right? It's not like
Nope.
you're playing against
Nope.
other people or anything. No multiplayer.
Mm-mm. Nope.
Have you played Skyrim?
Not direct. No. I've watched a couple people play, but yeah.
Because I haven't played The Witcher or Fantastic or Final Fantasy. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It seems super interesting.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how kind of to flesh that out, like what you're talking about, where there was society and it had a bunch of technology, and Planet of the Apes happened with robots.
Would you buy that game?
I do kind of like that idea. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
kind of see the aftermath of technology.
Well, I mean, one of the really interesting things that I found about it, because it really falls into like, well, how does somebody that has, generations and generations and generations after the fact, how do they wrap their heads around what that society was? Because they had, the conversations that you kind of have, like with the village elders and with anybody of authority or other villagers or anybody that kind of has, nobody really has a very good understanding, and that's understandable, huh? Because how do you describe, I guess, like 3D printing to somebody in 45 BC? How do you take the concept of rocket fuel and jet propulsion and describe that to somebody that's living in South America at the dawn of civilization? So for them to kind of understand that, they've really it's fairly clearly defined. You can almost understand why they would refer, or why they see it this way, as the technology was kind of just this bad thing, and why they've essentially built their own world around this concept of, well, we're of the land, it takes care of us, we take care of it, and they're really not a very hospitable group. They have very kind of they have like strict laws. It's pretty common for people to become outcast either permanently or for periods of time for crimes. Like it could be something like simple assault. It could be for violating some of the tenets of the village that they live in. But when it comes down to like the last big story element that I got to was that this protagonist that you're playing as, Aloy, she's kind of gone through the whole gamut of, she was born, she was cast out right when she was born. She was given to this other outcast, and he was supposed to take care of her, but there was a tribal ritual where she could essentially re-enter the village if she kind of won this competition, and of course she does. There's an outside attack from another group of people which kind of interrupts that, and it takes you to this point in the game where you are brought in. You're inside this massive cave, and this is what the rest of the villagers are actually referring to as the All Mother. You're in there's candles along these cave corridors. You have like straw beds where she kind of wakes up after being injured, and then she starts following one of these old matriarchs through a series of very technological doors. You're talking like, put your hand on this, a circle spins around, and it opens up. And like 3 major doors in, you're coming to this massive, almost vault door. And they're kind of describing that this is kind of where this last battle took place between the All Mother and the robot devil, more or less. And what we notice is this. I mean, so it's kind of a sacred place to them. And this is where we found you. It was right in front of this door. And the girl is kind of looking at this. Well, what's behind the door? Where's my mom? And the only thing she really has to go on is this little piece of technology, which again you get at the very beginning of the game. It serves as a crucial part of the gameplay. Is that she's able to interact with 3D displays. That's what this thing does. It kind of projects stuff out. So she's learning when she's a kid. She's like going through like little swipe left, swipe right, just images, and she's able to see things. Well, it looks like an image pops up which looks like her as an adult woman. Looks very, very similar, and what we can see as knowing what we know is a DNA strand between the image of her and that of this other woman that looks like her, and you see like it's like 94.78%, and so we're trying to lead into is she, what I'm at is what's behind this door. Is she essentially some kind of clone? Is there a society behind there? Is there some kind of automation process where her DNA is mapped, and for some reason a clone of this woman, which I'm assuming is some kind of prominent scientist from way back when, needs to be reactivated? And I'm actually into the whole open world game element where I'm past this whole enclave piece, and the limits to like how far the game will let me go as far as the map goes.
Yeah.
But the immersion level, I think, has actually gotten to the point where even though like I feel very propelled by the storyline because I feel very engaged. Like I really want to know, like, why is she? Who is she actually? Because she has no family, she has nothing else. She has a lot of drive, but at the same time, they rein in a lot of the features of the game so that they're manageable. You get the skill tree, but it's not overly expansive. It's fairly similar to The Witcher, but it's not as far as how big it gets. You can get a fair amount of completion on the full skill tree. So you can customize a little bit, but it's not really. There's enough room to be flexible, I guess. The other thing is like the weapon and armor choices. Your inventory, more or less. Also, they have like about 4 different range projectile weapons that you can use to kind of really tailor your own kind of game style. You have like your spear, like your classic melee. Then you have bow and arrow. You have essentially what you can do is you can fire trip lines that will trigger traps. You can fire like little globs through a slingshot. You can fire essentially like, kind of like rope tethers that can pin creatures down. So there is enough to be variable, but not to where you can get lost in the weeds. And I kept seeing that more and more, with everything that I was playing. I mean every part of the playing experience. That I wasn't, it never got to the point where either the controls, like there's too many combinations that I have to learn, or the map is just, it's too big and too intimidating for me to feel like I'm really going to get out there and kind of see everything. There's so many, or I never felt that there were so many quests that I'm going to miss one or I'm not going to be able to kind of complete everything. Everything felt really manageable. So even though I was able to kind of get into this game, like I said, for about 10 to 12 hours, I never felt that there was more content than I could handle. If I wanted to parse this thing out, maybe like a couple hours a night, I could still get a lot of enjoyment out of the game, and at the same time, make significant progress in the game to really get the most out of it. But like some of these other things, and I know this really isn't your genre, but these things that I'm talking about, like with there's some level of variability in the weapons, but not a lot. There's some level of variability in the skill tree, but not a whole lot. The map is big, but it's not huge. Does this kind of almost consolidation or compacting of, really solid content into these make that more digestible? Would that make you more willing to kind of go for this game?
Yeah, I mean, if it's something where I could play for the hours that I could,
Mm-hmm.
I could put it down, and maybe I have to put it down for a week because I have other things going on.
Yep, sure.
If I could come back to it and still be familiar with it, and to me that would be great. That's a great game, and that's where it kind of gets a little overwhelming sometimes with some of the big open world games.
Yeah.
If I have to relearn it kind of loses some of its appeal every time I have to go back in there.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I mean the game itself looks great. I guess some of the questions I have they'll probably never answer. As I understand, there's tons of animals, tons of packs.
Yeah.
If technology's died, how are these animals existing? Are they procreating?
No, that's going to be another one of the elements that they're going to be touching on, because there is kind of jumping into, I guess, a little bit more of the story, is that there's this, it looks like this cultist group that is able to, because let me back up a second. What you find out in the early parts of the game, like through context with outside cities or tribes, what have you, is that progressively these creatures are getting more and more aggressive, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. So like what you would see, like you'd see kind of like what would be like kind of like the horse, what's equivalent to kind of like the horse creature, metallic creature. They would say like, well, in the past you might spook them and then they'd run off, and and you kind of had to make sure you could still die because they might get trampled to death, but that was the concern. Well, then eventually they started coming after people, and then after that, these bigger, like it goes from like the strider, which is like the horse robot, to the sawtooth, which is about 3 times as big and 3 times as nasty, and these things they're starting to show up more and more dangerous throughout the years, and this has kind of been going on for a while now. So part of the story is going to it does delve into, okay, well, what is going on? Like, first off, what is driving these robots? Mm-hmm. Are we talking like the Matrix, where there's some kind of master control program in a factory and it's just kind of self-aware and it wants to get rid of the humans? Is there a human element where there might still be that robot factory, but there's somebody behind, like a person pulling the strings? Or what is kind of the dynamic, I guess, in this world between these machines and the people?
Is it evolution?
Yeah. And they've kind of alluded to some of those pieces with some of the interactions you have with different individuals. So I do think they'll actually get into that, and that is one of the big drivers. What's keeping me engaged in the story is what happened and what is happening and why is it happening this way. And all you really have to go on is, again, just these prehistoric interpretations of technology and what really happened when society fell. You're able to kind of go through using this little device, and you can find recordings from way back when before things kind of fell apart. Whether it's you see like a corpse, and they might have like a hollow file on their person somewhere that you can scan, and you can like see like the first one you see is a guy giving a message to his son for his birthday, and another one you kind of see like a series of them in this lab where there are a bunch of corpses, and apparently something happened, some kind of defensive network failed, and they're screwed. And what these recordings that you're seeing, it's the reactions of people after essentially they're euthanizing. They're right before they're going to euthanize themselves, and it's kind of like last thoughts right before it happens. and it's kind of like, all right, well, what was this defense network that fell, and what kind of, it just kind of, it keeps moving you along in the story to figure out what happened, but it really just kind of spoon feeds you little bits here and there. And the more like the extra content, like those recordings that you find, they help to kind of add to that story and help you kind of clarify some things. And they do it some pretty interesting ways. Like the hollow files on people is one thing. The other is if you stand on a certain rock, a rock face or ledge that's kind of high enough off, and you can kind of see the ruins of an old building, your thing might trigger, and you can see what it looked like back before everything fell apart. And you'll get like a little bit of a blurb from somebody kind of recording, well, this is like the Aeronautical Institute where my dad was a professor and he was teaching, and you just kind of see it trail off and like, holy crap. I mean, you're really able to kind of link back to what the world was like before, using this kind of delivery system for the information relative to the whole myths and legend that your tribe is telling you to kind of piece it together. Yeah. But yeah, again, within 10 hours, I've seen enough of both to kind of see, all right, it looks like they have a pretty solid design, I guess, for kind of delivering this thing. And like I said, I really feel like I want to see, like, well, who is this girl? What is this girl? So, yeah, I kind of took that and ran with it a little bit, but
no, it definitely sounds like a great game.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole de-evolution aspect of it, I mean, it's certainly be interesting. And if there's that element where she's different than everybody else, I mean, yeah, that clue-seeking kind of thing is definitely right in my wheelhouse.
Well, I'm sure I will keep you updated, as I always do.
Yeah, let me know.
Well, folks, what do you think? Horizon Zero Dawn, just out of the gate, but worth its weight in gold, or back to the recycle bin, back to the bargain bin? What are your thoughts? Let us know.